So that's enough of that crazy news and corporate stuff. But before I want to not forget, please subscribe to this show. You need to know all this information about your credit wellness. But let's get ready to rumble with my guest. And I kind of want to just break down really what I think about him. He is so creative. Good morning, Rodney. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you.
So if you don't mind, I'm just going to say a little bit about you. Is that okay?
That is fine.
I don't want you to
Absolutely fine.
blush, though.
No, it's too early for me to blush.
Well, guys, creative is an understatement when it comes to my next guest. When God gives you a gift, you run with it like the wind. And this man has truly tapped the sun when we talk about creative writing and producing. He writes funny, serious, fantasy, and comics for all ages. But that's not where it stops. He's a super giver, a dad, an entrepreneur, funny as heck, super connected, and one of the kindest humans I have the pleasure to know. His class, kindness, and never quit attitude are what I admire the most. He is sharp, a game changer in the screenwriter's world, and what I always say is the true meaning of a conqueror and friend. Ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, please welcome my friend, Rodney Barnes. Now, peeps, I just want to share something with you. This is a really short bio as the internet literally blows up when you Google his name. So please make sure to do your research about Rodney. So Rodney Barnes is an American screenwriter and producer. Barnes has written and produced The Boondocks, totally funny show, My Wife and Kids, Everybody Hates Chris, Those Who Can't, Marvel's Runways, American Gods, Wu-Tang and American Saga, and is currently an executive producer, writer on HBO's Untitled Los Angeles Lakers drama. He has also earned top honors for his work from Peabody Awards, American Film Institute, Writers Guild of America, BET Comedy Awards, and NAACP Image Awards. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, please welcome Rodney Barnes.
There's no way I can live up to any of that intro. There's no way, but thank you.
Of course you can. Of course you can. And I mean it from the bottom of my heart. You have been such an amazing guy and such an amazing friend. And I'm so honored to know you. So let's get after our questions this morning. Now, Mr. Barnes, this is a show where we educate people and build leaders, teach our youth, and create strong brands. Most of all, learn from everything that we grow through. And I always say, yes, grow through. We all start somewhere, financially, career, and family, and we all have a story that speaks volumes to those that admire us, like so many do of you. So let's talk. So, Rodney, what inspired you to take on the world of writing?
I always had a relationship with stories, words. I'm an only child, even though I have a lot of half brothers and sisters. And I spent a lot of time in movie theaters and in front of a TV and back during when there were only 3 channels of television.
Oh my gosh, really? That's
Yes.
so cool.
And so I started to absorb, I didn't know that I was actually going to film school as a kid, but I absorbed stories in a different way. When I went to the movies, I would watch them over and over and over again. Nobody wanted to go to the movies with me because I wouldn't leave. And it sort of just became a part of my life. You know, stories were like friends. And I had a teacher when I was in the 8th grade who said that if I ever worked as hard as being a writer as I did as being a class clown, one day I could be a good writer. And it stuck in the back of my head. Whenever anybody asked me what I wanted to be as a kid, I would say a writer based upon this teacher's sort of planting the seed in me. And circumstances in life, I had a plan that sort of went sideways. And a friend of mine said, if you could do anything with your life, I was probably 24, 25 years old. You could do anything with your life, what would it be? I said, I would write movies and TV shows. And I'm from Annapolis, Maryland, which is as far away from Hollywood as you could possibly be. And I was working on as a production assistant on movies and TV shows back during my area, because a lot of movies from the West come there to do like shots of the White House and different glamour shots. And I met Damon Wayans and on a movie Major Payne, and
Oh my gosh, I remember that movie.
he sort of encouraged me to, if you want to be a writer, you got to come to Hollywood. So I packed up my things. I lived in my car for about a year, and I slowly but surely started to put things together, and things worked out.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. You know, it's funny. You kind of remind me of my son because he does the same thing with movies. He also does something that we've always thought was a little strange, but now it just always makes sense, is that he would repeat what he would hear at the movie. Like when we would get in the car, he would start repeating what the actors would say, and we'd be like, why are you doing that? But he literally would retain information that was funny or compelling. So that's amazing to hear that. Well, thank you for that. Well, tell us about a pivotal point in your life, like that aha moment. It kind of sounds like you told us, like when you met Damon Wayans.
Well, there were a couple of them. I mean, I think in regards to what I'm doing now, because if you look at my career, it's two halves of a whole. First part of my career was comedy, and that door sort of opened and I walked in, but I never really wanted to be a comedy writer per se. I never saw myself as that, but that door opened first. And
Mm.
around 2012, I had a really 2010 to 2012, I had a really bad period of my life. And a gentleman by the name of Devon Franklin, he was an executive and a pastor, came to see me in the hospital when I got sick. I got really, really sick. And he encouraged me to work from my heart instead of my head. And
Mm.
I think I'd been in the hospital on and off for about 4 months. And I promised myself if I was able to get out of the hospital that I would begin to write from a different place.
Mm.
That I still write comedy within the stories that I tell, but I try to put some layering in there. There's heart. There's a lot of different dimensions and a lot of different things that earlier in my career I really worked off of one muscle, and now it's sort of different entry points into story. And I tell the types of stories that I always wanted to tell. And the thing with comic books as well, I've loved comic books my entire life, but I took my shot at writing one for Marvel, and that led to starting a publishing company and doing my own books.
Wow.
But all of that came from, again, writing from my heart instead of my head. And I think there's a different level of satisfaction that comes from my work than just making money.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love to hear that because I think that that is so true. When we work with our total self, you know, our tripart being that we were created to be, and specifically, like that pastor encouraged you to do, was to speak from your heart, all the things, all those things you said that you dreamed about when you were a little boy. Man, that was so important. And wow, that is really pivotal. I love that story. And I love the fact that you're working from your heart, and look at all the doors that opened for you once you did that. And once those two met, you know, of course, your creative mind, but also your heart is so important in all that we do. So, wow, thank you for sharing that. Um, can you tell us your why in life and like what keeps you motivated? Because man, I mean, you are left, right, here. I mean, you're doing things all day long, every day, 7 days a week. You are just working your patushkis off.
I think two things. The first thing would be I figured out a way to kind of deal with my own personal anxiety is if I give it something, if I can place anxiety, I was told by my therapist, is trying to control the future to a degree.
Mm,
It's like you're trying to anticipate what's to come, which we can never do. So I try to keep my mind occupied so that I don't have time to just sit and fret and worry and, do those things. To me, if I can create some actionable movement in my life, I tend to calm down a little bit. And
mm,
writing, I'm looking at my wall where I have all the various projects. It looks like a serial killer's wall of all these crazy things. But if I can keep my mind occupied on something, and I always have something to look forward to, it's different than controlling anxiety. It's more of having something to look forward to. So there's a degree of optimism in it. Because if this doesn't work out, one of the things about working in Hollywood is you could have 20 projects and 18 of them fall through. 20 of them could fall through. So for me, I learned early on that if I have a number of things going on at one time, I always, if one falls off, I still have something keeping me moving forward.
The law of
So
average, basically.
yes,
You're constantly going, and that's amazing, because what you're also saying is that, you get to check a box. So every time you finish something, you're working on completion,
yes,
whether it goes through or not.
yes. So it's always that. I mean, and work in an industry that's either feast or famine. So my lawyer told me a while ago that if you can create 7 different revenue streams,
Yes.
to always have other things. That's why I started the publishing company, because there have been periods, and I've been fortunate. I mean, I've been working pretty consistently for my entire career, but there were periods where there was nothing, certainly when I got sick. And I had to learn to do award shows or commercials or different things when all I'd known when I came in was working on sitcoms, and being able to develop the ability to look at these other things as just storytelling, but in a different way.
Right.
It opened up doors that, again, keep me moving, relevant, active mentally and emotionally. And I'm not just relying on one path. And if that path, if there's an obstacle in that path, what do you do? I've figured out that if I can just keep other avenues open, things tend to be more healthy.
That's really good. And I love that you're saying that, because for the younger generation, specifically right now, they do put their eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is that you have to have several eggs,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the nature of what this business is, back when I was talking about having 3 channels, you've got 500 now because of, if you include streaming and Hulu and cable and all of these different places where not only you can work, but you can sell your wares. I think being able to capitalize on the period of time, and you have the internet as well, where you can create your own things and your own little businesses, people who have web series and just different things, that different avenues and different ways to survive. If you can exploit those, I know my kids are so tech savvy with the computer and different things that instead of just consuming it as entertainment, there are ways that you can monetize it and be creative at the same time, and not necessarily just look to a studio or a network. Like when I broke in, there's so many other places that you can go and, develop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I guess that leads me into my next question, which is, what was the best advice you ever received from someone, and how has that helped you with your career and investing in your future?
Well, I think I have to go back to the work with your heart thing that I said earlier. I found that to be multifaceted, as far as not just with my work, but with my life in general. When it comes to investing, when it comes to decision making, for a long time, because I was operating from a fear-based sort of thought process, operated from my head. I made most of my decisions without a lot of faith involved that there would be something good that was coming. I always sort of was in defense mode constantly. But I think when you think from a place of intuitively, it's not the easiest thing to do. Certainly it isn't easy for me as well. But when you think from your heart, when you think intrinsically, I think you're able to manifest certain things in your life, personally, professionally, spiritually, that you wouldn't have if you just operate from one way of thinking. You have to be open to things sometimes that are uncomfortable,
Yes.
information sometimes that is uncomfortable. I think if there's any key to things working out for me in life when they've gone south, I think self-awareness. I've always been able to, if someone were to say something to me that I didn't necessarily want to hear, but intuitively I knew it was true, I would accept it. And I know some people who reject that, who don't want, they see that as negative or criticism or whatever. I think I've been able to take it and try to work on some of my shortcomings. And
That's really good.
my therapist has a saying, everybody's flawed, but there are two types of people. There's one person who defines themselves by their flaws, and then there are other people who work on their flaws and
Yes.
try to improve them. I want to be in that category. I think I started off in the other category. This is just me. But over time, when you're humbled by life, I think that you're more apt to, if humility is sort of the bridge to being a better person, I try to subscribe to that.
Absolutely. Well, I can attest to that you definitely are that person. And, what you're talking about or what you're saying, my husband, who's actually a pastor, he always tells people that when people are talking to you, if you can look at it as just information, no one wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I want to piss Rodney off, or I want to piss Angela off. No one really wakes up and does that. So, it's really about everyone's come from. But if you have a go-to, which is understanding that, like you said, you lead with your heart and you work with grace and mercy in your life, then you can always look at things, whatever's coming to you, as just information, and you can pick it apart. And you can say, you know what, this I'm going to throw over here, and this I'm going to receive as information and something that I need to do to change. And, I've always been like that also. I always believe that I've never arrived, that I'm always in a learning place. I try to tell, the young people that I mentor and, my staff, that look, at the end of the day, we're constantly in a learning place, and you can't get offended by what people say. Just take it as information. So that's amazing. I love to hear that. Well, that segues us into you and the best advice that you have given to someone.
The best advice I've given to someone, I think, be honest with yourself. I mean, I think that because I work in Hollywood, you meet a lot of people who want a lot of things. And more often than not, the thing that you want may not be the thing that's best for you. That's not for me to say, but I think oftentimes if your want doesn't align up with your aptitude, that can create a lot of heartache. And knowing yourself, being honest with yourself about that, because sometimes I think ego can take over and start to think for you. And sometimes the thing that you may want actually may be blocking you to the thing that's really best for you.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's probably best, because, like I said, I talk to a lot of writers, and I talk to a lot of folks who want to be, actors, directors, producers, whatever. And sometimes the person that wants to be a director because they think they have an idea of what a director is might be a better producer. Or a person who wants to be a writer may make a better actor, or sometimes it's perfect and spot on. The thing that you want is exactly in alignment with you. But you only really know that if you get to know you, and you get to know the thing that you want and what those two things require. If they're equally yoked, I think, to me, that creates the best path for peace in life.
Absolutely. I like that word you used, equally yoked. That's really, really important stuff.
Sometimes my yolk is all over the place. Sometimes
you're an over easy egg.
Sometimes I'm an omelet. Sometimes it's scrambled. Sometimes it's running off the table. It's a lot of different yolks, but I try to equalize them. That's the
That's
goal.
right. That's okay. But that's your truth. So I love it. I love it. Well, now we segue into the last little part of our show, and that's talking about some of the interaction that you and I have had from a professional level.
Oh yeah.
And and I want you to tell me one thing you didn't know about credit that you now know and why you see it as valuable in your personal life.
Patience. I think I think the biggest thing is, full disclosure. I went through a really rough divorce, and it wiped me out financially, but it devastated my credit. And I had taken pride for the better part of my adult life. My relationship with credit has been a roller coaster at best, because I got a Sears credit card when I was in junior college, when I was like 19 years old. And I think I got everything at Sears. I thought it was like a magic wand. Like I could go and get anything I wanted. And I didn't even know they were going to send a bill. No one had taught me anything about credit, how it worked, that there was a score, that there was anything. I just saw these people at a table who had a Sears credit cards that they were sort of giving away. And I ended up with this credit card, and I just bought everything. And one day when I stopped paying them, because I was in college. I had a job from time to time to time, and it seemed like $30 a month or whatever the bill was manageable. But somehow my young mind didn't manage it. And I found out I had bad credit. And once I figured out what that was, this is shortly after the period when I came to Hollywood and started to work. I started to work on my credit, and I built up a really good credit score. And then everything went south after during my divorce, and that's where you came in. And I kept wanting, like within 2 weeks, to be back to where I was before, if not better. Uh, and that's not the way that it works. You have to really be patient. But within that patience, it's a weird thing when it comes to it. Character. All of the principles, seemingly, many of them, I won't say all, seemingly many of the principles of life, um, with coming, how can I say, coming correct with yourself, being true to yourself, paying your bills on time, those types of things. If you do those things over time, things get better. But you just have to have the patience and the stick to itness. And you would always say, and it's like a big sister. You would come, no, Rodney, it's that not yet. You have to give it more time. And I would be mad. Why? Why do I have to make more time? I want it now. I want what I had. And the more patience I had, and I would put my mind on other things and good things instead of my wants. I would look in 4 or 5 months better, things were better, and then it would continuously get better. And I bought my daughter a car, and I thought about you. I bought my daughter a car 2 weeks ago, and when I was at the dealership, the guy asked about my credit, because I guess a lot of people had bad credit, certainly during COVID.
Right.
And he said, "Man, you've got a great credit score. You could get anything in here you wanted. You could get this whole business if you wanted." And I thought about you
Yay.
immediately. I thought about you immediately,
Oh,
and all of our conversations, and my appreciation of you and your good work and helping me restore. I think it's culturally, you don't really think about money when you don't have it. You don't think about credit when you're trying to survive. You
yeah.
don't, the two don't. And I don't come from, my family didn't have much, and so never really took credit, and no one ever talked to me about it. No one ever even considered it. We never had anything.
Yeah.
And so, when you leapfrog into this life that I'm in, where I have a few things, and you see how important credit is, not just for the things that I want or to make life simpler, but for business,
Yes.
the things that I need.
Yes.
Um, and, my kids, my this, my that's a very vital component to financial health. And
Absolutely.
when you
Yeah.
don't have it, it's almost like either you have to make a lot of money to be able to, pay for all of these things. But there was something in that gap of me having to for pay cash for everything, that I started to look at some of the things that I used to buy as not necessary now.
Yes.
Now that I'm starting to build it back, it was like, do I really need this?
Mm-hmm.
Why was I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be more thoughtful with how I purchase things, travel, do different things. I still want it to be the way that it was. That's a hint. That means I'm going to call you in a week and bug you. But I've learned that, you know, maturity when it comes to decisions. It's funny just how much money and life sort of walk together.
Yes.
And credit certainly is a major component of that. So always thank you for your help with me.
Oh, thank.
But I think for anyone who's listening to this, the more you can be aware of
Yes.
your emotional circumstances and how they affect your credit and your life, and to try to keep all of those things healthy, um,
Well, they
that would be
say
the
that
advice.
your credit equals your behavioral patterns.
Yes, 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 yes. And I think corporations now, that as we move into more of a corporatized, controlled society,
Mm-hmm.
things like credit become markers for psychological patterns, how people think, whether or not
Absolutely.
you have the ability to be mature enough to handle, $500,000 home or $1 million home or whatever your goal is. You know, your ability to manage that often is reflective in your credit scores, and how much you have in the bank at a given time that you don't spend frivolously, and all of those things. And like I said, no one had ever talked to me about, I've had to learn things the hard way.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I would say a virtue is, once I get it, I go with the plan. But the pain of getting it, if there's anyone who could avoid the pitfall and
Yeah.
not have to learn from the mistake and just learn from the advice and the information that you provide, to me, that's sort of the way to go.
Well, that's my goal. My
Yeah.
goal and my heart is really to teach the youth
Mhm.
and to teach people that have never been taught. Because believe it or not, I talk to all kinds of people, even very wealthy people who are, sons and daughters of very wealthy people that have never been taught.
Mhm.
We live in these two income homes where parents are busy and they don't have time to sit down with their children and explain this stuff. And I can tell you that the gift of financial literacy and credit literacy is one of the best gifts that we can give our children and our grandchildren. It is super important because your credit is an investment tool to build wealth. And when
Yeah.
you, yeah,
No, I just wish, instead of trigonometry and calculus, sometimes financial literacy would be
well,
something
it's
that was taught
coming.
in school.
Yeah, it's coming. Some
You
of the
need it.
private schools are doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't, no one taught me about how to do my taxes or any of those, how to manage a checkbook or any of that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah. Now, so you talked a lot about that, but now that you know about credit,
mhm.
okay, or the credit world, what would you want to pass on to the youth about the importance of a good credit score? Like, what's the one thing that you would tell someone?
Mm, to protect it, um, to look at it as a valuable tool in your toolbox. It's almost
Mm-hmm.
like a hammer. It's one of those things that, um, you don't think you'll need it in the way, like my kids look at stuff. As soon as they get money, they want a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
they identify with that. They don't identify it with security, like insurance. Like,
Yeah.
if they need something that isn't a tangible, a pair of Jordans or something like that. But if they need something for school, if they need something for life, if they need something going down the road, to always be able to have the security and the peace of mind to know that, financially they're healthy and that they don't always need to come to me. That sense of independence to me builds confidence and self-esteem,
Mm,
certainly that
that's
I didn't
good.
have. And again, the way that psychologically and emotionally these two, money, credit scores, all of these things are related. Your ability to take care of yourself, to me, is a major component in you being able to look at yourself in a positive way. It's
Yes.
one thing to be able to look to a parent, but I think as long as you're looking to a parent to save you, you're almost thinking like a child. It's like you never get that ability to feel confident enough to go out in the world, because all you have is their ability to watch over you the way, like when you're a kid. But when you have the ability to take care of yourself, I think it moves you closer to your dreams. It gets you to a
Absolutely.
place where anything is possible, because I know I can take care of myself if I don't get the best of news, or if it takes longer than I thought it was going to be, or whatever. I look at guys like Spike Lee, who did his first film, and Robert Townsend, who did their first films off credit cards. You know,
Right.
they had a bunch of credit cards and they figured out how to make their first film. If they didn't have credit cards, you know,
Right.
they only have the relationships that they have from people who they can come to. So
Yeah.
your ability to be creative fiscally really comes down to how you've managed your life up until that point. So that would be my
Absolutely.
advice.
That is really, really, really good advice because, I've had people say to me, I feel naked or I feel so ashamed.
Mhm.
And like you're saying, that confidence, like even that story you talked about, going into the dealership with your daughter. I mean, being able to walk in with confidence, knowing there's not going to be an issue here
I
because
was I was like an action hero when I walked in. Because
right.
there would be times before where I would call you and say, I'm about to buy a pair of pants. Do you think it's okay if I get these pants? And then I'm holding on, hoping you give me a good answer. I walked in and I had a strut, and my daughter was nervous. Daddy, do you think, baby, don't worry about it. I got it. And I walked in like Stone Cold Steve Austin. I sat
That's
at the
right.
table and just, baby, get what you want.
That's
And
right. That's
all
amazing. And
because
that feels good, right?
yes, yes. Oh, it felt incredible. It felt incredible.
So, my last question for you is,
Yes.
so what is your credit score?
Oh my God. I think it was 832 or something like that was what
Woo!
he said to me. And
Did
I
you
was
hear that?
surprised
Did
because
you hear that,
the
friends?
last
He said his
time,
score was over 800. What?
and I think it was when you had talked to me like 6 months ago, it was like 760
80. It was
or
786.
there you go. And then when he said eight something, all I heard was the eight. So he could have said 8.05 or something. But yeah, it was in the eights.
That's wonderful. Well, congratulations on your success. And friends, you've heard it here. This is A to the N to the G. You're listening to the Real Credit Queen show. And Rodney, thank you so much for showing up to the show. I really appreciate you. And it was such an honor and a privilege to have you here today.
Anything for you. And you're
Oh,
welcome.
all right. Have a wonderful Sunday.